What's up guys, it's Talon here, and in today's video, we're going to get you prepared for the Solo Victory Cup by taking a look at MrSavage's insane 21 kill performance in the first round of the Solo Victory Cup. MrSavage lands at Naughty Nets, and the reason why he lands at the southernmost building is because there's a katana spawn. The katana is by far the most important item in your inventory. It'll allow you to rotate easily in endgame and key efficiently in early game. Notice how when MrSavage is moving through his POI, he doesn't move through the center. He skirts on the outside toward the beach. Because he landed at the southernmost portion, this allows him to know that every opponent is simply going to either be to his left or to his north. After picking up an easy elimination at the tower, he immediately builds up and ramps to get information. Not only can he see if opponents are around him, opponents will more than likely shoot him down, and this opponent tries to do so. This allows him to know his next victim, and he gets a pretty easy elimination onto this opponent. After rotating out of Naughty Nets and getting a free kill along the way, he sees an opponent fighting another opponent just outside of the reboot van, outside of Mega City. This will allow him to go in and key, and he gets a free elimination. However, the one opponent is pretty difficult to kill, ends up cracking him for a significant amount of his shield, and MrSavage has to use a ton of his mats and all of his splashes. The next important thing I'm going to really emphasize is that it is sometimes the best thing to disengage. And the reason why he disengages in this fight is because he has sub 50 materials and he used all of his splashes. Another huge factor as to why he disengaged is because the whole point of his drop is to get to Mega City when the first zone essentially closes. This is when the bot spawns. He immediately goes to Mega City, gets a one chest, notices that the opponent has just killed the bot that drops the key card. He fortunately finds him, who is hiding inside the building, picks him up, and eventually is going to get the mythic shotgun, which is going to really ramp up his confidence when he is W King throughout the rest of the match. MrSavage, after acquiring the mythic shotgun, essentially keys anybody that he sees. After fighting this opponent who gets him down to a very low 5 HP, he decides to change how he W keys. Notice instead of W keying all the people inside the zone, he immediately katanas out towards the edge just outside his zone. This allows him to pick up a free elimination that is free of third parties and isn't as congested. We're going to skip ahead to the most important fight of the match, which is where he is fighting the person for Mythic Pulse Rifle. Notice how when he is fighting this opponent, he is using his hard mats and never goes more than one box away and continually plays safe throughout the entire fight. The fight eventually drags on so long that the opponent pretty much gets scared and disengages, and this allows MrSavage to have the most broken gun in the game, the Pulse Rifle. After W keying some more and getting some pretty free eliminations, I'm going to demonstrate this very important fact. Even if you are W keying, sometimes it really is better to disengage. MrSavage once again runs into the opponent that gave him some trouble outside of Mega City, and the exact same thing happens. He gets into a drawn out fight, losing a slurp, and eventually loses all of his hard materials. But he decides to disengage smartly back to where he had already eliminated an opponent, and this allows him to get a full refresh worth of brick. This is very crucial to do when you're W King to make sure you don't just throw your entire game away for 1 point. After picking up the brick on the body which he had already eliminated, he decides once again to W key. Notice the target selection here, even on edge. Notice how there is an opponent who is built up in this old building, reclaiming it with brick, and already has a ton of space established. Instead of W keying that opponent, he continues to skirt the edge of zone and notices someone who has fresh builds and brick. This is a much easier W key, and this results in a free elimination for MrSavage. Savage is in the last zone before moving zone start, and you're going to want to make sure that when you're in this situation as well to try and get a refresh, and this is exactly what MrSavage does. However, he does it in a very different way than what we've seen throughout this VOD review. Instead of pressuring with the pulse rifle or using a lot of builds, he simply gets on a back wall of an old tarp, smacks in and catches an opponent completely off guard, and eventually picks him up. The reason why he was able to do this is because there's a bug in the game which will sometimes make your audio not be heard when you're smacking on an opponent's wall. So he takes advantage of that and gets a full refresh of cap mats. Now, the only mistake of this VOD review is immediately following this refresh. He hits an opponent for a significant amount of damage out of the sky. Instead of just letting him go, he katanas to him and gets the elimination. However, this opponent, because he had gotten hits for so much, decided to essentially box up when he landed in the middle of zone on low ground. This invites a ton of pressure, and MrSavage gets sprayed for around 30 seconds. Fortunately, due to his elite mechanics and low ping, he was able to hold it off, and this could be avoided if he simply just let him go, since he had a maximum refresh. MrSavage is now in moving zones, and he's going to show you how to properly play katana as well as what to do while you're katanaing. After getting some easy eliminations on backside zone, he katanas up 3 times, but he makes sure to look down and get information and look at height. And there it is, there's not a single person playing height. So what does MrSavage do? He lands and immediately cranks up around 10 to 15 layers. This ensures that if anybody tries to take height with a katana, it won't happen. And this also is great to do when you have the pulse rifle, because it's going to set up free eliminations on people who are katanaing, and MrSavage gets 2 free kills on opponents who are flying in the air with the katana. After getting those eliminations in the air, MrSavage decides to try and katana down to get materials off those refreshes. Unfortunately, when he goes down there, there's only ammunition to be had. He loses height, gets into a build fight with the opponent for a little bit, even cracking his shield. However, the opponent pops heals and continues to claim height, and MrSavage finally disengages with 20 builds. This is incredibly important to take note on. Instead of continuing to crank up on height and burn his mats, he has enough mats to go to the low ground, get established, and get important refreshes. If he had continued to build up and then went down with no mats, he would have gone down earlier. After MrSavage gets established on low ground with the 20 builds he used to disengage from the opponents on height, I want you to take notice of his anticipation of zones. Instead of having no plan, you could tell with the fact that he pulled out his splashes that if the zone pulled far, he was going to use those splashes to tank zone and hopefully get some free eliminations on people moving towards the moving zone. He sits there and waits for zone to pull back and notices 2 people fighting above him 1 layer. He immediately takes the wall, waits for them to finish fighting, and then he picks up the refresh, getting both bodies as well as a ton of white heals, which is going to be crucial for him to survive in the heal off meta. Notice how when he katanas again, he immediately checks height. This time, he's not able to get up to height, but notices that height is shambles. Unfortunately for him, MrSavage has the pulse rifle, and he's easily tap fired out of the air. The big thing that MrSavage does that really helps him win this game is he has the presence of mind to essentially catch the refresh. After cracking his shield, he hits him with a shotgun, placing some cones to catch the extra white heals. And this is incredibly important because he's going to need those in the heal off. It eventually goes down to a 1v1, he pops a slurp, pops some splashes, and goes back to the refresh which he caught. He gets those splashes, puts them in his inventory. The opponent doesn't even have enough heals, and MrSavage ends up winning the game with 21 eliminations. Well guys, that's going to do it for today's VOD review. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications. And I hope I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.